Now this is one of the best, strongest, fastest leveling build for the Barbarian in Season 3. With this build, you can easily destroy enemies 10 levels higher than yourself without the need of any specific gear or legendary aspects. This build is so strong that you can destroy huge groups of enemies and shred bosses. Now I did test majority of the leveling builds, and this leveling build was the strongest and fastest out of all of them. So let's check this out. Okay, so first I'm going to show you clearing this dungeon, and as you can see, I'm level 69 and the enemies are over 10 levels higher than myself. Now this build is so strong that you don't need any specific gear or legendary aspects for this build to work. Now in the early levels and leveling with the Barbarian, you're going to be generating fury very slowly. So with this build, I did focus on generating fury and doing the most amount of damage. Now I did test all the core skills abilities, and in the early levels, all the core skills are strong, but the one core skill that takes the least amount of fury is double swing. So because double swing uses the least amount of fury, you can use double swing most often, and because so, you will destroy bosses really quickly. Now just be aware that this is a leveling build, so once you reach world tier 4 and start getting ancestral level gear, that's when you want to focus on your end game build, and I'll have updated videos, so stay tuned.
And I recommend you to try this leveling build out, and you'll see how strong this build is compared to the other leveling builds. And I'll have the full build layout in a D4 build planner in the description below. And definitely check out the tips section if you're having trouble beating the Capstone dungeon in the early levels to get to world tier 4.
Now this is an active build, so you do want to combo your skills, but I'll go over everything in more details in their dedicated sections. Okay, so next, checking out the skills. Now the basic skill I'm using is Bash, and Bash will stun the enemies and is one of the best ways to generate fury. And for the arsenal selection for Bash, you want to switch it to your bludgeoning weapon, so you can swap your weapons when using your other skills, because it will benefit from your other passive skills on your skill tree.
The next skill I'm using is Double Swing,
and this is our main damage dealing skill. Now all the core skills are strong, but out of all of them, Double Swing uses the least amount of fury, so you can spam Double Swing more often compared to the other core skills, allowing you to destroy bosses very quickly. And of course, in the early levels, you generate fury really slowly. And for the arsenal selection, it's automatically selected to dual wield. The next skill I'm using is Rallying Cry, and this will grant you unstoppable and generate you fury. The next skill I'm using is Steel Grasp, and this skill is really good to group enemies together. And the next skill I'm using is Ground Stomp, and this skill will stun all the enemies around you. And if you pair this skill with Steel Grasp, it's very easy to stun all the enemies around you. And the last skill I'm using is Charge, and Charge got a huge buff this season, so Charge does huge amounts of damage. And for the arsenal selection, make sure you switch it to Slashing, and you can pair the skill with Steel Grasp and Ground Stomp, so you can easily charge all the enemies around you. So the gameplay idea is to use Steel Grasp a couple times around you to gather all the enemies around you, because you do have additional charges with Steel Grasp. Then you Ground Stomp to stun all the enemies around you. Then finally, you quickly reposition yourself so you can charge all the enemies at once, which you will be seeing a lot during my gameplay. And you don't need any legendary aspects for this combo to work. Okay, so next for the weapon expertise. Now, I feel like the best weapon expertise when leveling is the two-handed mace expertise. And this states lucky hit, up to 10% chance to gain 2 fury when hitting an enemy. Double the amount of fury gained while berserking. You deal 15% increased critical strike damage to stun
and vulnerable enemies
while berserking. Now, the reason I feel like this is the best weapon expertise when leveling is because this will generate you fury. And in the early levels, you generate fury very slowly. So anything that will make you generate fury quickly will make the leveling process easier. Okay, so next for the Seneschal Construct. Now, I do want to mention that the construct isn't really beneficial when leveling, because all your stones will be low level, and you might not even find the right stones. But there are some stones that will make the leveling process a little bit easier. So the first governing stone I'm using is Tempest, and this is just one of the fastest attacks for the construct. And the tuning stone I paired it with is Swift Support, and this will increase your attack speed for your construct. And I also paired it with the tuning stone Resource Support, and this will regenerate your primary resource. And the last tuning stone I paired it with is Mockery Support, and this will taunt enemies hit by your construct. And the second governing stone I'm using is Flash of Adrenaline, and this will increase your damage. And the tuning stone I paired it with is Safeguard Support, which will increase your damage reduction. And I also paired it with the tuning stone Fortify Support, which will grant you Fortify. And the last tuning stone I paired it with is Initiative Support, and this will teleport your construct if out of range. But this tuning stone you can change if you get a better one, but unfortunately I don't have all the tuning stones because I'm still leveling. Okay, so next let's check out the skill tree. And really quickly, I do want to mention that this is a leveling build. So I took skills that will generate you fury very quickly, because in the early levels, you do generate fury really slowly. So starting with the basic skills, I put 1 point into Bash, a point into Enhanced Bash, and a point into Battle Bash. And Bash will stun the enemies, and it's one of the quickest ways to generate fury. Next for the core skills, I put 5 points into Double Swing, a point into Enhanced Double Swing, and a point into Violent Double Swing. And Double Swing is a really strong core skill that uses the least amount of fury. And Double Swing will also apply Vulnerable to enemies. Now I did test all the core skills, and because double swing uses the least amount of fury, you can spam double swing more often, allowing you to shred bosses really quickly. And next I put 3 points into endless fury, and this will allow your basic skills to generate more fury. Next for the defensive skills, I put 1 point into ground stomp, a point into enhanced ground stomp, and a point into tactical ground stomp. And ground stomp will stun all the enemies around you, and this skill will also generate you fury. Next I put 1 point into rallying cry, a point into enhanced rallying cry, and a point into tactical rallying cry. And this skill will grant you unstoppable and generate you fury. Next I put 3 points into imposing presence and 1 point into martial vigor. And these skills are good for defense and survivability. Next for the brawling skills, I put 5 points into charge, a point into enhanced charge, and a point into power charge. And of course in season 3, charge got a huge buff, so charge is one of the strongest skills for the barbarian. Next I put 3 points into swiftness, and this will greatly increase your movement speed. And having high movement speed is important when leveling, because you can clear through dungeons and events really quickly. Next for the weapon mastery skills, I put a point into steel grasp, a point into enhanced steel grasp, and a point into warrior steel grasp. And this skill will pull all the enemies around you. And having additional charges, you can pull enemies 2 to 3 times, making it very easy to gather all the enemies in one spot. Next I put 3 points into pit fighter, 3 points into no mercy, and 3 points into slaying strike. And these skills will greatly increase our damage. Next I put 3 points into thick skin and 3 points into defensive stance. And these skills will grant you fortify and damage reduction, which is really good for defense and survivability. Next for the ultimate skills, I put 3 points into tempered fury and 3 points into furious impulse. And this skill states that each time you swap weapons, you gain 6 fury. And since we're using 3 skills that swap weapons, you should gain fury really quickly with this skill. And last but not least, for the key passive, I put a point into walking arsenal. And this states dealing damage with a two-handed bludgeoning, two-handed slashing, or dual-wielding weapons grant 10% increased damage for 10 seconds. While all 3 damage bonuses are active, you gain an additional 20% increased damage and attack speed. And because we are using a two-handed bludgeoning, two-handed slashing, and dual-wielding weapons, it's very easy to get all 3 bonuses active at once. Okay, so that's pretty much the full skill tree layout for this build. But like I mentioned before, just beware that this is a leveling build. Once you reach world tier 4 and start getting ancestral level gear, you'll see at that time you will be generating fury very quickly. So that's when you want to start transitioning to an endgame build.
And I will have updated videos once I reach level 100, so stay tuned.
Okay, so next let's check out the gear. And I'm just going to go over some important stats that you're looking for on your pieces of gear. The thing is that when leveling, your gear doesn't really matter because you're going to be switching your gear all the time for better gear. The only thing you want to look at when leveling is the item power level. So for example, I'm going to switch out this weapon for the weapon I have equipped. So when you're leveling, you want to look for the plus green number. And if it has it, then equip it. But once you reach world tier 4 and start getting ancestral level gear, then that's when you want to focus on your stats and choose your gear more carefully. Because when leveling, you'll be always finding better gear.
So ideally, the only stat you're looking for when leveling is movement speed.
And you can get this on either your boots or your amulet. And having high movement speed when leveling will allow you to clear the dungeons and events really quickly, making it easier to level up fast. And one legendary aspect that will help generate you fury is the aspect of unrelenting fury. And this states killing an enemy or hitting a boss with a core skill refunds 20% of its base fury cost. Can only happen once per skill cast. And this legendary aspect will help you generate fury quickly. And this legendary aspect is located in the Codex of Power. But like I mentioned before, you don't need any specific gear or legendary aspects for this build to work. Because as you can see right now, majority of my gear are rare gears and they're not legendary gears. So I'm barely using any legendary aspects. And I can still easily destroy enemies 10 levels higher than myself. Okay, so next really quickly for the gems. Now for the armor pieces, you're looking to use ruby gems to increase your maximum life. For your weapon, you're looking for sapphire gems to increase your critical strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. And for your jewelry, you're looking for gems that will max out your resistance. So for the gems, I'm using a ruby gem, a emerald gem, and an amethyst gem to increase my resistance. So as you can see, pulling up my resistance, they're almost all capped out. But of course, once I level up higher
And get better gear.
I should easily cap out all my resistance. Okay, so next for the Paragon Board. And I do want to mention that since I'm still leveling, this Paragon Board isn't fully complete. But I'll have a fully completed Paragon Board once I reach level 100. And with this Paragon Board, I did focus more on getting the legendary nodes. Because when you're leveling, your glyphs will be low level. So it's not really worth it getting the glyph sockets. So starting with the Star Board, I took the Exploit glyph. And this will increase your vulnerable damage and apply vulnerable to enemies. The next Paragon Board I took is Weapons Master. And I took the legendary node. And this states swapping weapons grants you 4% of your maximum fury. And since we're swapping our weapons all the time, this will help you generate fury really quickly. Then I headed this way. And the next Paragon Board I took is Warbringer. And the glyph I took is Wrath. And this will increase your critical strike damage. I also took the legendary node Warbringer, which will grant you Fortify every 75 fury you spend. Okay, so that's pretty much the Paragon Board setup I have as of right now. But I'll have a fully updated Paragon Board once I reach level 100, so stay tuned. Okay, so next I'm going to share some quick tips to easily clear the Capstone dungeon to get to World Tier 4. Now, the first and most important tip is actually to max out your fire resistance. And equipping ruby gems on your jewelry should easily cap out your fire resistance.
The Capstone dungeon boss does mostly fire damage.
It will damage you a lot if you don't have fire resistance. So if you cap out your fire resistance, the boss's fire damage will barely do any damage to you. And this will allow you to easily defeat the Capstone boss.
The next tip is that if you're still having trouble surviving the Capstone dungeon boss to get to World Tier 4, then drink a fire resistance elixir.
Because this will increase your fire resistance, and this will also increase your maximum fire resistance by 2%. So this should greatly help you survive the Capstone dungeon boss.
And the final tip is that you want to level up your gear as high as you can from the blacksmith. Because once you reach World Tier 4, it will be easier to get materials quicker, and you can start building your endgame builds. So you want to get to World Tier 4 as soon as possible.
Okay, so thanks for checking out one of the best, strongest, fastest leveling build for the Barbarian in Season 3. With this build, you can destroy huge groups of enemies and melt bosses. This build is so strong that you should easily get to World Tier 4 without the need of any specific gear or legendary aspects. And of course, the full build layout is in a D4 build planner in the description below.
Now, I will have updated builds for the Barbarian for level 70 to 100. And I will have endgame builds once I reach level 100, so stay tuned.
Hope this helps, and more Diablo 4 videos to come. And of course,